Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last in the series for this year of the Landcare Australia conference webinar series. Today we've got Sue Bestow from the National Soils Advocate's office. We'd like to thank you for attending today. As we can't be together at the conference this year, these conferences have been developed as a series of webinars, the abstracts that we got, and we're going to speak through those over the rest of this year. The idea is that we can get a snapshot of what's going to happen. The conference will still go ahead. It's on next year. If you want to know about future webinars around the conference or the actual conference itself, sign up to the Landcarer site and you'll get straight feed about when and where and how to participate. As we get into this meeting today, I'd like to, at this point in time, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we work on. Hundreds of people have come together for this webinar from all around Australia to hear about the leading conference speakers. Wherever you've joined today, I'd like everyone just to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that you sit on throughout Australia. Today I'm speaking from Queensland and Gubbi country, and we recognise the traditional owners and their continuing connection to land, water and culture. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Wanya. Now today's speaker, as I said, is Sue Bestow from the Office of National Soils. She's working with the National Soils Advicate, and she's provided a fascinating abstract about the 5 steps to improved outcomes for national soils on a meaningful scale. So we're going to flick over to Sue for a presentation. At the end of that presentation, there'll be opportunity to ask Sue some questions. Just before we get into that process, just a bit of housekeeping. We'd like you to put any of your comments or questions through the session, and at the end when we answer them, if we can't get to them, we will be able to provide some feedback in real time after the actual webinar is completed to get to some of those questions as we go through. Now, to submit a question, you need to be signed into Landcarer, and you just type them into the comments box underneath the webinar screen. If you're not signed into Landcarer, just email them to hithere@landcarer.com.au. That's hithere@landcarer.com.au. Email them in and they'll go onto the same list of things. Now, if you're having any technical issues and you're signed into Landcarer, click on the help button at the bottom of the screen for live chat support. If you're not into the Landcarer, again, send them to hithere@landcarer.com.au. Okay, so good afternoon, Sue. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'd love to hear your presentation. There's quite a large audience today, so welcome.
Thanks very much, Mick, and thanks very much for Landcare Australia for putting these webinars on. I think they're really useful and a really good thing to do. So just a few more little comments about myself and why I'm speaking to you today before I get on to the substantive matter. I support the Honourable Penny Wensley, who's our National Soils Advocate. But before that, I used to help deliver the agricultural component of the National Landcare Program, and prior to that, the Extension and Outreach Program. But quite relevantly to today, before that, I used to be climbing fences and digging holes in paddocks as an agronomist, having worked in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia and WA. I've covered a lot of the cropping zone. So there is a lot of relevance from the point of view of this webinar. So today what I'm talking about is interventions that we can put in place to improve soil health across Australia. And really what we're trying to do is create an enabling environment for change. Now, there's no argument against the fact that soil health is declining, and we've known that for quite a long time. But within that, we're asking our questions, why is this still happening when we all know that it's a really important thing? So today I'll look at some different interventions that we can put in place to improve soil health across Australia at a meaningful landscape scale. In so doing, demonstrating that a highly coordinated collective action across these interventions with support of sustainable and with capable and committed partners, we can create that enabling environment for change, enabling us to realise the productivity, environmental, social benefits that can accumulate, not just for us, but for future generations. And I think that's a really important factor. So first of all, looking at the current status of soil health, I shan't labour over this point, but really making sure that people understand that soil health is closely linked not only to the broader conservation, climate and land care goals, but also to the economic well-being of farmers and the broader community. So Australians more and more are expecting the sustainable production of healthy food and fibre that comes from a healthy agricultural landscape, and the growing expectations that soil will be managed in a way that will sequester and store more carbon. So advances in agriculture have allowed us to feed and clothe an ever-growing population, but it has come at a cost to the health of our landscape and to our soils. Many modern farming techniques have disrupted the natural function of the ecosystem and the environment, and that's impacted on our soil health, the atmosphere, waterways and biodiversity. Clearly this can't continue. There's been a lot of press about this, that we've got 60 years worth of cropping left in our soils, and that's not a lot in the grand scheme of things for future generations. So what we want to be doing is improving soil health to achieve sustainable production, also reducing the societal and environmental impacts that agriculture has on our production systems. So here in this talk, we plot a new path for soil health. It's new and it's different. So exploring what constraints need to be addressed to facilitate and enable innovation by creating a new operating environment, asking what it is that asking why land managers haven't improved soil health management practice and what it does to incentivise change. So having a look here, first of all, of what soil health is, because unless we understand soil health, it's, we have a journey without a destination. So a healthy soil has biological, chemical and physical properties that enable healthy plant growth, and with follow-on healthy benefits to humans and animals, and also maintaining environmental quality, biodiversity within the soil and also more broadly. There's lots of parameters that we can measure in soil health. We can think about soil organic carbon, pH, nutrient availability to plants and animals, soil bulk density, soil biology, surface compaction, non-wetting conditions. The list is long. But considerations of soil health should also include landscape condition, things like the presence of erosion, degraded gullies, sandplain seeps, dune systems, salt encroachment, dryland salinity, etc. So the functionality of a healthy soil, it's not just for productive agriculture, but a healthy soil more efficiently stores nutrients, it recycles nutrients, carbon, water, thinking of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium being the big ones. So healthy soils are less prone to erosion, there's fewer off-site effects for things like wind erosion, dust storms, sediment loads in streams, think of the barrier reef, etc. So the other thing is, of course, that any action that increases soil organic carbon will draw down carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Thanks, Mick. So land managers need to do things differently. Now, there are ways in which we're quite confident that we know what we should be doing differently, and there's reasons why different agriculturalists haven't currently adopted these. More importantly is that we need to do things differently and more conservatively to foster soil health. This is quite an urgent need for change. We need to adopt soil health principles and practices that protect our soils on the landscape scale. Across Australia, we have a very diverse landscape. Everybody knows that. So the principles that we're talking about here, some pertain more in some areas and more in others. So there'll be farmers that take some of these principles on in an additive manner to have incremental change, and some of them will do a transformational change across paddocks. But it's important that we mimic nature better and natural ecosystems more closely than our current modern farming systems do. So collectively, the type of principles that we're looking at are minimising soil disturbance through the adoption of no and zero-till crop establishment and precision agriculture. We're looking at minimising the use of inorganic fertilisers and pesticides. They're known to affect things like your soil biology as well as your soil chemistry, cause a lot of runoff, which is obviously not good. The addition of organic matter produced and grown on site, things like stubble retention, minimising any crop stubble burning, green manuring, the addition of animal manures. The application of externally produced organic amendments, and of course this is a situational thing, more pertaining to horticultural and intensive industries, but including things like compost, manures and biochar. Integrating grazing animals back into the environment is important, back into particularly cropping systems through pasture lay rotations, pasture cropping and rotational grazing systems. We need to maximise our plant productivity and biodiversity using different crop rotations. We've always rotated, but there's still a lot of paddocks that are wheat on wheat, year in, year out. We need to do pasture cropping, intercropping, have more diverse pasture swards. It helps build up nutrients, limit erosion and improve our soil structure. Minimising bare ground is important. Historically, we've done a lot of fallow work in the thinking that it conserves soil moisture for the following crop. But if a soil doesn't have a living root in it, the soil biology will go downhill. So we need to also be applying some biotic fertiliser formulations. There are lots of these different ones around. It boosts the soil microbes, particularly in areas where there's light soil texture in your sandy soils. The other thing to consider is converting marginal and degraded cropland back into permanent pasture, into agroforestry, into vegetation blocks, and restoring wetlands where that's appropriate. Also using soil conservation practices such as contours, windbreaks, and having conservation areas. They assist in holding water in the landscape, which is going to help, of course, your agricultural production systems hold the water there so it's available for the plants. Robin Batterham, Australia's ex-chief scientist, will call this sustainable intensification. So it's producing more food and fibre from smaller areas, but doing it more sustainably. And I think part of that is thinking about how we do things and increasing our production while remaining sustainable. So on a landscape scale, it may mean that less productive areas need to be retired from agriculture and used for more environmentally friendly focused purposes such as carbon storage, groundwater discharge and recharge control. And we also need to be protecting prime agricultural land from urbanisation and other land use encroachments. So if we're having a look here at the benefits of this type of change. So there are benefits at different scales. Within the soil, you're improving your soil health, the soil biology. You can increase soil carbon and you can increase things like your water storage capacity and get a soil that has a greater pH buffering capacity. At a farm level, improved soil health in that manner is going to have net economic benefits through lowering costs and have more sustainable productivity. At the catchment scale, benefits improve from the functioning of the whole of the landscape. We get a better health of the landscape, native flora, fauna, groundwater reserves, and the quality of the stream runoff improves in that sediment and nutrient loads decrease. At the societal scale, the benefits of boosting health are even more profound. Soil health is linked to a lot of broader conservation goals, making soil health an intergenerational responsibility. Internationally, we can improve our farming sustainability from Australia's international reputation point of view. We are seen as being a more responsible global citizen, which is also important. So, thanks, Mick. If we can change the slide. What we're looking at here are the pillars supporting change. So that slide there, actually, I'll just pause for a moment, is Penny Wensley, our National Soils Advocate, standing in an exceedingly good pasture at the back of Yass, and you'll see there's some very good-looking cows in the background. So we're looking here now at the pillars of change. Currently, the environment is good. Right now, there's a confluence of factors that are creating traction in the soil health space, particularly in the political sphere. What we have is there is a soil strategy that is currently under development. A lot of you have had input into that previously, and that should be delivered by May next year. We have a National Soils Advocate. It's a permanent position, and it's supported by the Office of the National Soils Advocate at Prime Minister and Cabinet. We have a Parliamentary Friends of Soil group has just been established. There is the Ag 2030 imprimatur that to increase agriculture to a $100 billion industry by 2030, and soil health is included in the Ag 2030 ambition. And in the technology investment roadmap, you'll see that there is a stretch goal that saw carbon to be measured at $3 a hectare per year on a landscape scale, which is a transformational change when it comes to measuring and estimating our soil organic carbon. So what we need to be doing is thinking about these things coming together. Now, 30 odd years ago, we had the initiation of the Landcare movement. Now, it may well be our time in soil health, and I've heard people say, this is our Landcare moment. We have been able to energise real change in the soil health space. So what I'm looking at here are some interventions to create this enabling environment. I will say that there's an acknowledgement here. Globally, there's a number of documents that outline what needs to be done to motivate change in the way we manage our soil. And some of these are outlined in the Nature Conservancy's roadmap for collective action to secure conservation and economic benefits of healthy soils. The Global Soil Partnership, 5 Pillars of Action. The Soil Health Institute. Here we draw on those as well as the Soil RD&E strategy to really put forward some ideas such that Australia can make some real difference here. I've met a lot of farmers in my time, particularly as an agronomist across Australia, and I've never met a farmer who doesn't want to farm sustainably. They want to be good and they want to be able to hand their farm across in a better condition that they received it, whether they bought it or whether they inherited it. So the fact that our soil health is clearly still declining, something is preventing that change at a landscape scale. And we ask the questions here is what we can do to catalyse that change and create an enabling environment. We can look at the barriers to adoption for change, which need to be addressed. But in addition to that, we need to be having a look at how we can enable innovation. Barriers to adoption in this space tend to be complex, they're persistent, often locally dependent, very interrelated, and it makes overcoming them quite complex. At the highest level, we're looking for collaborative effort across a number of partners and looking at sustained investment. And through those things, we will make meaningful progress. So we're looking for collective action to realise benefits that will accumulate for generations. So let's have a look at what they are. They cluster around 5 key areas. We've got science, research, knowledge exchange, economics, and policy and collaboration. And I think I just said 6. So we'll have a look at those individually. These pillars of change, first of all, having a look at science. So we do have a good understanding at a landscape scale of what it's going to take to improve soil health. However, if we have a look at the agricultural systems, we need to take a new approach to our research, and that is to look at a multifactorial and systems approach to research. It's not necessarily having a look at single factor research, but having a look across the landscape and across all the different factors which have an impact. So we're looking for a good comparator, so that we can have a good sense of before and after, but looking, like I say, at across the landscape of lots of different factors. The 2014 Soil RD&E strategy, they concluded that despite substantial investment in soil research, that there's a lack of coordination and it's resulted in inefficiencies. So we're going to be improving the coordination in this space. We've also got the support that's been provided to the CRC for high performance soils, which is important, $40 million across 5 years, and across 10 years, sorry, for the soil CRC, and the development of the National Soils Strategy. These are all excellent moves forward in this space. We also need to consider further research against those factors that I was looking at earlier, the principles for improving soil health, and seeing really where we can look to get more evidence on a local scale to be so that farmers and agronomists and other advisors can use that information to feed that through to farmers. So really in that space, we're looking at our actual soil health knowledge that supports change. The next thing that we're looking at here is support for innovation and practice change. This is know-how and agricultural extension, because at the most fundamental level, the land managers need to be brought into the broader conversation about soil health improvements, and we need to draw on our the recent Soil CRC project, which is looking at why soil management practices are or aren't adopted. So it's looking at, from a land manager's perspective, they're looking for trustworthiness and validation of the soil health improvement techniques and practices. Who is promoting them is a really key consideration in the extension services. And you've got agronomists who work very well as intermediaries between research and farmers. They translate soil science research and they make it very locally relevant for farmers. They're often highly trusted within the knowledge system, and they form part of that local network for farmers who are seeking to change. We're looking for local innovators. Farmers will rely on other leading farmers for regional testing of approaches on a landscape or paddock scale, so that other farmers will consider adopting them. So you're really looking at that farmers who are leading farmers who will take on practices that are leading edge. We need to make sure that information that farmers are given is very local, because obviously a lot of the soil health challenges are local, looking at soil variability across the landscape. So we're looking at building trusted networks. They're looking at co-development of knowledge such that researchers are working closely with the scientists, but again that the agronomists are translating that data into locally relevant information, and utilising farming systems groups as trusted resource. And once again, working with the scientists. But also we need change champions in there, and farming systems groups will often provide those. So in summary from that, what we really need are independent extension services that are linked to farming systems groups and also linked to the scientists. So sitting behind that is giving farmers not only the knowledge base from point one, but also point two, the support and the confidence to be able to take on change, knowing that they're well supported. The third thing is fostering capacity building through education. A number of times I've been sitting around a room with soil scientists and they're all starting to look a little long in the tooth. And what we need to have is some new and up and coming scientists and extension professionals come through. So that takes a number of steps. Skilled people don't just appear, they need to be bred and nurtured. So we need an initial interest, and that goes all the way back through to school and even primary school. People from rural backgrounds will sometimes get that through their family connections. But in urban areas, we've got a lot of budding soil scientists currently sitting in primary school who need encouragement. They need good university courses available, fulfilling graduate job level availability. And once they're there, young people need mentorship and guidance, and that's where the more mature soil scientists and extension professionals can help. So investing in capacity building is a really important pillar to support change. Then we're looking at improved soil health monitoring standards and tools and having access to that, good access to that data. Because in the context of improving health from a national point of view, if we can't monitor the change, it is very difficult to link the practices that we are doing with soil health change across the landscape. So we need to know what we are measuring. Are we measuring soil organic carbon, soil pH, soil biology, bulk density, surface condition, etc.? And we need to do so nationally on a nationally consistent way. We need to sample consistently. We need to use a mix of traditional and new techniques when it comes to the soil monitoring. And we need to understand why we're doing the monitoring. And as noted earlier, it's to reduce those risks in decision making so that we can understand the biophysical processes going on to improve our management. Because good soil monitoring will complete the circle of how the management affects the soil, and then moving back to how that soil health needs to be managed in order for it to be improved. So we need to understand the magnitude and the direction of change in the soil health metrics to be able to understand that. And we need to be able to know how the soil health is impacted by management. Now, I will make a particular note here on soil organic carbon, because a lot of people in talking about soil health will link soil health very closely to soil organic carbon, which clearly there is a very strong link there. But measuring soil carbon is not easy. And if you can't measure it, we need to estimate it. And if we can't estimate it, we need to model it. And they will come together to be able to verify any change. And as we look forward to marketplace and economic drivers, which I'll talk about in just a minute, if we can't accurately measure our soil carbon, it's very difficult to verify change, and therefore very difficult to put an economic value on that change. So our next pillar of change is economic drivers. Farmers are there because of farmers are first and foremost a business. They're running a business, and in order to make change, they need to have economic drivers. And sitting behind that is that soil health needs to become a leading indicator of economic and environmental outcome on farms, such that when land is bought and sold, it is also done with regards to the health of that farm and the health of the soil that comprises it. So the economic sustainability of our farms is absolutely crucial. The old adage, it's hard to be green when you're in the red. Economic sustainability enables farmers to adopt better environmental and soil health practices, and in turn it reduces the risk of their business and provides broader essential services and ecosystem services. So from a business finance point of view, we're often confident that we know from a scientific and extension point of view that certain management practices to restore soil health are important, but they're often long-term. It's very difficult to change soil health in the very short term, but that is a direct contrast to business finance cycles, because of course farm lenders, banks and financiers need to know that they're going to be getting money back on a very short-term time scale. So there's a bit of a mismatch there. We need to change that and include the people like banks and financiers when we're looking at long payback scales for soil health management practice change. We need to improve leasehold agreements such that they include soil health. Some leasehold and sharecropping agreements will, but often they don't, particularly including the rangelands areas. And that can be obstructive when it comes to long-term soil health changes. We need reward for investing in soil health. Improving in soil health should be seen as an investment, not as a cost. And so it needs to be supported by things like soil certification programs that allow for higher property prices, reduced loan rates and reduced insurance premiums. Certification programs that allow consumers to seek products with good soil provenance. It's carbon credits, which I've briefly touched on earlier, and payments for natural capital improvements. They'll all be an encouragement for the landholder to partake in better soil health practices. We need to overcome operational hurdles, and things like the adoption of no-till farming machinery. It's an expensive upfront cost that pays back over time. And once again, this comes through to having better finances through banks and working that through on a long-term cost-benefit basis. And sometimes there needs to be a catalyst for that change, particularly with expensive machinery up front. We need access to products and services and information that supports soil health, and particularly thinking about agricultural resellers and fertiliser companies. They often will be selling product that is for their own economic gain. They can also provide a lot of good information, but I think farmers also need to be aware that selling the product is also in their economic interest. So if we have a look broadly at policies, broad government policies that can support soil health, we look at we need to be having long-term sustainability, restoration of degraded areas, and economic resilience of agro ecosystems. And the types of policies that you're looking at is supporting regeneration and supporting the good research which goes into it, and supporting landholders in change and to invest in change. And that can be it can be driven from top down, but also from bottom up, and making sure that we landholders are demanding good policy to support them at the state, federal and local levels. We need to be building more collaborative approaches across greater ranges of stakeholders. I think many of you are aware of the number of stakeholders that are involved in this space, and we need to be having a look, rather than a constellation of well-intended efforts, we need a coordinated and aligned approach to change the way in which we are managing our landscape. So what we need to be doing is improving that collaboration across the stakeholders, nationally, state and local level. So thanks, Mick. If we can now have a look here at how we turn the tide. So we're looking at momentum. I indicated earlier that there is a good appetite politically for change. We've got a number of key strategic policies in place. We're looking to create a paradigm shift in the soil health space for delivering conservation and productivity benefits at that meaningful scale. So what are the metrics of success? We know we're going to be successful if we can produce enough high quality food to support healthy people. We can enhance the natural landscape enhance the resource base and the broader environment to the extent that future generations have the same opportunity to produce food that we do now. We have financially viable farm businesses and rural communities. We continue to have the well-being of farmers and their communities, and we continue to achieve this under a changing climate. And that's obviously a really important factor as we move forward and we look towards intergenerational change. So next slide, please. So I just want to acknowledge here the work of our first National Soils Advocate, Major General Michael Jeffrey. He was our National Soils Advocate from 2012 to 2017, and again more recently in 2019. He stepped aside due to ill health, which is when our current advocate, the Honourable Penny Wensley, became the advocate. But to acknowledge General Jeffrey's wonderful effort, we now have the General Jeffrey Soil Health Award. You'll see there from that slide, nominations are open. So I would encourage everybody to look at more information on the website and where people have done excellent work in soil health, be it on the ground, be it as extension professionals, or be it as educators. We would encourage people to apply. And I just thought I'd pop that little plug in at the end there. So thank you very much.
Quite a encouraging discussion, a presentation. Some of the feedback that's been coming through in the chat line. The one that I really loved is this is the Landcare moment. There's good political support for meaningful change. That's very powerful for the Landcare people, to producers and networks to hear. A couple of questions have come through while you've been speaking. The first one, I can't find the first one. I just lost it. The first one was talking about biochar and wanting to know what role biochar plays in the future of a changing paradigm shift and moving towards a more sustainable use of our soils.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And you'll notice that I did mention biochar as a soil ameliorant. Biochar is a product that, for those of you not sure, it gets produced under anaerobic conditions such that it produces a type of char. And pretty much any biological material can be made into biochar. And the quality of the biochar is very much dependent on what that feedstock is. And our research so far, as I understand it, under the Biochar research program, which was run a few years ago now, is that biochar made from chicken manure was in fact had the highest nutrient content. So it's very variable depending on the feedstock. It can be extremely useful in our soils. It can have a deleterious effect when it comes to herbicides and tying up nutrients. And I think more research that needs to be done there. But I think that as we go forward, it may well be part of the mix, and it's most certainly something to watch this space in the research place to see its exact need. But yes, it can be very helpful.
All right. So the next question that came in, that's quite an interesting one. It's talking about Australia being such an old continent and having very old soils as it was when we got here. It's had quite a lot of impact on those soils over the last 200 plus years. Back in the old days, you see some of the earlier writings and some of the earlier films. It talks a lot about the traditional management of soils from the traditional owners. Is there any work being or any research being done in that space with past management, or has it been tied to any opportunities to demonstrate past practices?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting one, particularly in the pastoral areas. What we're finding is that a lot of the traditional methods were very good and poorly understood. And I think with Bruce Pascoe's done a lot of work in this space, in the Indigenous land management. And really it's looking particularly in the pastoral areas to go back to some of those management techniques where there's small fire burning, across the landscape. So that's probably about my only comment on that, but I would encourage people who are interested in that space to read Bruce Pascoe's work. Dark Emu is the book, and it really goes through a lot of those issues.
All right, so there's one last question that we have here, and it was talking about using macro and micro soil biology as a component of an assessment on biodiversity when you're doing natural capital. So using above ground macrofauna is one way of saying the land or the vegetation is healthy. Has there any work been done on looking at the micro and macro biological life of soils to consider as a biodiversity measure?
Yeah, look, as a biodiversity measure in particular, that's probably a little bit tricky, and we need to look at the reasons why we measure different things to answer that question. But within soil science, there's been over the years there's been much more of a focus on soil chemistry and on soil physics than there has been on soil biology, and this has more recently been recognised. So there is an uptick in the research concerning soil biology, and one of the things that they're looking at is the whole of the soil biodiversity, which is massive. Statistics will tell you how many billion microorganisms there are in a teaspoon of soil, that sort of thing. But I think more importantly, that we think of the soil biology about its functionality, and clearly, obviously, closely we're linked to soil carbon. And there's a range of different tests you can do with soil biology. The cotton industry, actually, they promote theirs as burying a pair of cotton undies in the paddock and coming back next year and seeing what's left. Because the quicker your cotton undies degrade in the soil, the stronger the soil biology is. Clearly, that's a very crude measure. You can do things like the Hanny soil test, which is a measure of soil biology. You can use de facto testing through soil organic carbon. But I think it's really important that we consider soil biology more importantly, because of that space of really increasing in your soil health, because it is recognised that a really diverse soil biology is really important, whether it's the macro or the microfauna.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that answer. One last quick one. There's a couple of questions that come up, but I'll try to facilitate a union of them. They're talking a lot about the regenerative framework, and there's a lot of people out there who are talking about the various stages of carbon and organic matter and putting perennials in the paddock. One of the questions that have come up, what's the government's feeling about some of those products? Are they able to achieve the long-term lasting impacts, or is there just to be more research done in that to make sure that they have the desired impacts?
Yeah, when you say products, are you thinking of the regenerative agriculture principles? I'll assume that you are, so I'll answer along those lines. The term regenerative agriculture is quite a new one, but a lot of the practices and principles that sit behind it are actually quite well established. So when we're looking at adopting those practices, it really comes down to some of the comments I made earlier about taking a systems approach to research, because over the years we've done a lot of research and we know a lot about soil science, but regenerative agriculture pulls that all together. And when we're looking at things like making sure that you've got living roots, throughout your soil, very difficult in WA, of course, where it chooses not to rain for most of summer. But doing those types of things, I think that if we wait for the last of the data to come in, well, then it's not going to happen. So we have to have confidence of the general high-level principles across a system, taking that systems approach, and then be able to look more and more about the finer detail of that. And I do know a lot of people who are doing research in this space, and to be honest, they're looking for trial sites a lot, because what tends to happen in the regenerative agriculture space is a landholder tends to go, oh, well, I'll adopt this across the paddock and 2 years later, they'll say the soil health's better and the paddock's looking good and my production's looking good. But there isn't actually a side-by-side comparator that scientists will need in order to be able to measure things. So that's a really important factor when you're looking across the landscape and looking for scientific data to support that change.
All right, that's a great question, answer to a pretty vexing question that comes up a lot in my day-to-day work. Pretty much wrapping up now, and thank you very much for that presentation, Sue. Really enjoyed it. It's everyone was a little bit shy when the questions started. We've got quite a few coming in now, so what I might do is put them in a document and flick them over to you, and we can put them up on the Landcarer page. A lot of them are sort of tying together. I'll simplify them into it. We can put a little bit of a blog up on the Landcarer page about those things. Okay, so thank you for everyone for attending today and registered. And as I said, this was the last one for 2020, which, if you'll agree, has been a pretty unusual year. Log in and become a member of the Landcarer website, and you'll get regular bursts of information about the next ones that are coming up, and also look out for the Landcare conference that's coming up in the next year. Again, thank you very much. This has been recorded, and I know there was a couple of little issues earlier on with some people seeing it. The webinar will be up in full shortly, and a notice will go out via Landcare about when that's ready. Please feel free to share it, and thank you very much. And thank you to the Australian Government for the funding of Landcare, and thank you very much, Sue, for your attendance today. Well done.
Thank you. Cheers.